The International Christian Embassy Jerusalem is your embassy in the heart of Israel, founded in 1980. From our headquarters in Jerusalem through our branches in over 80 nations and yours in Canada, we seek to challenge the Church to take up its scriptural responsibility to remind Israel of the promises made to her in the Bible and to be a source of practical assistance to all the people in the land of Israel. On today's program, Pastor Adam Gabeli and Reverend Malcolm Hedding have a discussion about Michael the Archangel. We meet some of the key people behind the scenes at ICEJ Canada, and we visit Yad Vashem to see some Holocaust artifacts that are held there.
Hello, I'm Donna Holbrook, National Executive Director of the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem in Canada. I want to tell you about one of my first trips in Israel. I had just returned to our hotel room from the Jerusalem March, wearing my Canadian-Israeli t-shirt and carrying our Canadian flag. An elderly gentleman came over to me and asked me where I was from and why I was in his country. I told him I was from Canada, had just returned from the march, where thousands of other Christians from over 80 nations had marched, and that our group was there to tour Israel. He pressed on with more questions, so I mentioned Yad Vashem and finally declared, "We're here because we love Israel," to which he asked another question. "So why do you love me? Not us, but me." To which I was surprised and answered, "Because God tells me to, and I do with all my heart." That satisfied this gentleman, who then showed me his arm with the concentration camp number tattooed during the Holocaust. He told me that 80 of his family members perished. He then led me by the hand to the area in the foyer where his wife, relative, and friend were sitting, waiting for him. I smiled as he introduced me around, and then I politely said goodbye, only to retreat quickly to my room where I lost it. I cried, and I cried.
Daniel chapter 12, verse 1. And at that time Michael shall stand up, the great prince, who stands guard over the sons of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble such as never was, since there was a nation even to that time. And at that time your people shall be delivered, every one who shall be found written in the book.
Today with me I have Reverend Malcolm Hedding. It's a joy to have you with us, Brother Malcolm. You've been serving the ICEJ for many, many years. You served as the international director for 11 years. You're now a spokesman for the ministry internationally. But it's a joy to have you here. And I had a question particularly today about the Archangel Michael in the scriptures and its relation to Israel. Is there a small capsule of teaching and truth that you can share with us, particularly about what the scriptures say about this angel?
Well, the Archangel Michael is one of these major heavenly beings alongside the Archangel Gabriel. And they are mentioned frequently in the Bible, as was the devil, an archangel. And he was even more beautiful. The Bible says in Isaiah 14, Ezekiel 28, that he was the covering cherub.
Lucifer?
Lucifer, yeah. And he's called Lucifer, as you quite rightly point out. And he had instruments of music in his being. The Bible says that. We don't quite exactly know how that happened or what he looked like, but he was this incredible archangel that was responsible for worship in the presence of God. And of course he rebelled against God, and we know him as the devil or Satan, but he is Lucifer. And it's those chapters say, Lucifer, son of the dawn, how you have fallen, and a record of this archangel. Michael is the archangel that is tasked with the protection of Israel and the Jewish people. And that's why Jesus said, this generation will not pass away until all these things are fulfilled. In other words, the root word there is not generation as in time. We incorrectly interpret it like that. It's not 70 years or 40 years. It's generation, genia in in the Greek, which actually means this people, this generation of people, this nation, this race.
Right.
That's what it means. Will never pass away. Why? Because while it is tested and assaulted and everything else, there's a great archangel of war who's watching over the nation of Israel. Now, the archangel Gabriel is always a minister, as the Bible calls angels, a minister of good news. He's a minister of peace.
Right.
So if Gabriel arrives in your bedroom one night, you are
blessed and highly favored.
Blessed, as he did with Mary.
Right.
And other instances. Gabriel's always in a place of peace and joy and brings good news. But if Michael arrives in your bedroom, then you must know there's some major conflict on the go here.
Wow.
And it was Michael who rose up as a result of Daniel's prayers.
Correct.
In order to facilitate the purpose of God in what Daniel was praying for. These angels operate under the instruction and sovereignty of God. Absolutely. And they took on great principalities of Greece and Media Persia.
Yeah, the Prince of Persia, as is written
in the unseen world, to facilitate the return of the Jewish people to the land of Canaan. And Michael, the Bible says in the book of Daniel chapter 12, will stand up again at the end time in order to protect the Jewish people and save them from a global assault. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see today that more and more, with every passing month almost, the position of the nation of Israel is becoming more precarious. I read a note this morning before we came to these times together, that Israel is now actively preparing for war on all four fronts.
Yeah.
And that's because the alignment of nations against her with overwhelming firepower is incredible. I mean, it cannot be laughed off. I mean, Hezbollah have some 150,000 missiles.
And then Iran's at the doorstep.
Iran's at the doorstep, and Hamas is at the south. And the other day we had an attempt from the sea to attack Israel.
Really?
Yeah, they intervened and stopped it. Wow. And it came from Gaza.
Okay.
And so there's this continuous assault, and then you get the assault of nations who continue their barrage against Israel.
War.
Yeah.
Correct.
And you've got Nikki Haley, who gets up in the United Nations and warns them that she will no longer accept these resolutions after resolution that are totally unjustified, totally biased, totally prejudiced against the Jewish people. So there's this global mounting assault. And while we admire Israel's determination to defend herself, I think we're getting to a place where without God's help, it's not going to happen.
Absolutely.
And that's where Michael is so important. And that's why the Bible says, in terms of the final restoration of the Jewish people, and it's worth noting that the Bible says there will be 2 exiles of the Jewish people and 2 returns. And after the second and final return, we will have the consummation of the age and the coming of Mashiach.
Yeah, that great day.
And the Bible says that day will be punctuated beforehand by an intense global battle against Israel. You have that in Revelation 16,
right?
And Zechariah 14. All nations bring themselves in some type of global attack on the nation of Israel. And you can see how that can happen. You just see it with these riots now, where these Gazians are trying to tear down the border. And they are violent. They're sending children into the front. And when Israel defends herself, no one looks at the source of what's going on behind it with Hamas, which is a designated terrorist organization given wholly and completely to jihad and the murder and destruction of the Jewish people by their own confession.
Right.
We're not talking badly about them. They proudly announce it. But the world condemns Israel for defending herself. There's this, it's like a irrational darkness that's overcome the media and people who will insist on always trying to paint Israel as the bad bully in the region and responsible for all the drama in the world. And if you can just get rid of them some way. I mean, it has overtones about the German Third Reich.
Right.
That saw the Jews. They're just the problem in the world. And so we saw with the Third Reich, they're fighting these incredible battles, but they will divert millions of dollars to a struggle against a group of people who are not non-combatants.
Yeah.
And in an attempt to murder them.
Well, in the recent protests along the Gaza border, we've seen pictures coming out of flags with swastikas on them.
No, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. They've even been banners of Hitler, where it says, "We will finish the job."
Can you imagine?
And they do this, and the world media say nothing. Oh, it's just acceptable. It's rhetoric, and it's just nonsense. So, but there is this global assault against the Jewish people, and thank God there is an archangel.
Wow.
Who the world does not count on, who is a mighty archangel.
Wow.
And he will come from God, and he will defend Israel.
Wow, isn't that remarkable?
And that's what she needs. And God will help her. We thank God for that.
Yeah.
And so that's the story of Michael.
So important, even for believers to understand that behind all the rumblings, behind all the upheaval, it's more than politics. It's more than human rights. There's a spiritual conflict going on.
Exactly.
So thank you, Malcolm.
You're welcome.
So appreciate that.
God bless you.
Bless you.
Up next, we meet some of the people behind the scenes at ICEJ Canada.
Hi, I'm Donna Holbrook, and welcome back to Inside Israel. I have two other guests here today. Kelly Stewart is our ICEJ Canada administrator. She is our executive administrator. And Jude Hodgson is our communications and operations director. And just for you to know how we work as a ministry in Canada, we have about 26, 27, maybe 28 now volunteers, mostly volunteers with a very minimal core staff. And you are seeing, for those who have called here, you have met Kelly by phone. And if you've been to our office, then you have seen her or behind the Mission Fest booth. Kelly, I'd like to know, it was through Jude that I came to know you almost 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I remember you coming in for the interview, and you said something to me about Israel. Mm-hmm. To you.
That I was called to Israel. And I was thinking about that, and it actually goes way back to when I was about 6 years old and heard my very first message on my very first day in church about the Good Shepherd. Wow. And the Good Shepherd, you see, I grew up in a household where my father was a violent alcoholic. And so to hear that message that there was a good daddy out there, I just embraced it. And so in times when I felt really scared at home and I went to sleep at night, the Good Shepherd would come to me. He would walk, he had a staff, he was just beautiful. And we would walk in the wheat fields in Israel, and it had to be Israel because that's the only place I knew of him. And I knew it was him because the wheat would bow down so we could make a path. And he would take my left hand in his right hand, and we would walk. So I found a great sense of peace. And I didn't realize until recently that as we were walking, he was instructing me about Israel.
You had a real drawing in your heart. And I must say, Kelly, you are just the most proficient. I've never had anyone in the office, which is a home office, so you have become part of our family, actually.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Timely and so conscientious and efficient. And so people know this, and they will call, and sometimes I pick up the phone and they'll say, is Kelly? I said, sorry, Kelly's not here, but we'll have her call you back. But I think it's more than just a ministry or just a call in maybe for a donation. It's people need prayer, and you will offer prayer for everyone who calls in, and people need prayer on a daily basis.
Oh, they do, and the things that they share with me it's just incredible, and it's such a privilege to be able to pray for them. And then I get calls back sometimes to say they've been healed. And, you know, what a wonderful thing God has done, like bringing me here through Jude.
Yeah.
Jude I've known for 30 years.
Yeah.
And she's been with me through all my children. And also learning how to pray at our local church. We took classes together on how to pray for people and their healings. And it's just been a wonderful journey, a continuation of the journey, really. And this is a continuation of my journey.
Well, it becomes very relationship based, isn't it?
It is.
Well, we have so many wonderful people who call here, and they become like family. Mm-hmm. And it's a beautiful thing. And you had your first opportunity to see Israel was through ICEJ during one of our, I believe it was our early January trip from the West.
No, actually, my first one was to the Feast of Tabernacles.
Oh, the Feast of Tabernacles.
And then my second one was in a January one. And interestingly enough, in that tour, I was given a dream by the Lord in the year 2000. And my husband passed in the year 2001. Mm. And that dream took me out of this forest to a riverbank, where I was to get into the waters and cross it, and a hand swooped down and picked me up on the other side. And believe me, I was afraid to swim these waters because it was at the headwaters, and I'm a good swimmer, but not that good. So I had to trust. So I had to get in at my ankles, at my knees, and just release myself to the other side, which I did. And the Lord picked me up, and he didn't say a word to me, just looked at me, and he bowed his head, and I had to follow him. And we went to the top of this hill, which I thought was a hill. And we stood on this outcropping, and underneath were 3 baby eagles. There was a branch and 3 baby eagles in a nest. And now we fast forward to this tour, and we couldn't go to the area that we wanted to go to that day. So we were detoured to a place called the Vulture Path. And my ears perked up when our tour guide said, well, of course, in North America, you call it eagles. So sure enough, I'm there, and I'm walking through, and the only term I can use is gobsmacked, because here we are looking at the exact, on the Golan Heights, the exact outcropping, and I see that I have followed Jesus up a donkey trail, up the side of this cliff. I can't even tell you how high it was, but I knew that was the solidification of my call to Israel, and to be on the wall, not only physically, but spiritually for Israel.
That's great.
Jude, we know about your interest in Israel. You went way back in 2001 with a group, and you've been back many times since then. Mm-hmm. What has, how do you feel about the ICEJ ministry and your focus in it? I know you've shown yourself as executive and team building. What does that tell our people, our viewers, about what your role is for us in the ministry here in Canada?
God has a plan for every person. Every single person is called by God. I believe that totally. And in 2001, when I was in Israel, it was a special birthday for me, a Jubilee birthday, and I got a trip given to me, and so I went. And that's where the Lord got a hold of me about laying down my business and picking up His and working for His kingdom. And that's when I got engaged in missions. I left business. And as you know, I was a street missionary for a few years. And then the Lord started speaking to me about using my skill set, which is organization, speaking, communication, education, all those sorts of things. And so somehow through prayer, praying at Toronto City Hall, I bumped into the woman who led Mission Fest, and through that ended up taking that on for 7 years. And while that was happening, it was very interesting how it worked out, because I got to meet you again after knowing you.
That's right, and at the church at Catch the Fire.
At Catch the Fire, yeah.
Right.
Donna and I had both taken a course on the gifts of the Spirit.
Right.
That must have been in the early 90s.
That's well.
And long ago. And we were friends then, and then we reconnected when I was leading Mission Fest, and Donna invited me to come and be part of the board of directors for ICEJ.
Right.
So I started taking a look at the ministry, and I was just I was so surprised, because I know how ministry operates, and I know how much effort it takes to take something that is very small, and especially something that didn't even have charitable status back then.
There was nothing.
There was nothing.
Except reel-to-reel tapes.
Exactly.
And then no one wanted those.
And they were obsolete.
So it was in 2001, and I invited Jude in first, and then we built this team and across Canada. So now, to keep that solidified with reps across Canada, our second largest country in the world, and here we are, only a tenth of the size of the U.S. population-wise. So it's Jude who does the communications. We set up this webinar. It's been a dream of mine. And so every month we do prayer regularly, every Wednesday, and now with the reps, that we can keep in touch with one another and know what each other is doing, and to pray for one another.
Well, prayer is the engine of the whole ministry.
Isn't it? Yeah.
It's what operates everything. We don't make decisions without prayer. We keep that as a priority. And that's really the way I believe, and one of the reasons why God has blessed the ICEJ.
Well, and we've grown and grown and grown is because we've pieced together this beautiful unity in a team that has Israel and God's heart for Israel at the very basis.
Exactly.
So, thank you, ladies. I look forward to many more years of growth and friendship.
Thank you. Thanks, Son.
Up next, ICEJ Canada Executive Director Donna Holbrook hears from Dr. Susanna Kokkonen about some artifacts from the Holocaust that are kept at Yad Vashem, the World Holocaust Remembrance Center.
One of the projects that Yad Vashem has been doing in 2013 is called Gathering the Fragments. And what we are trying to do actually before the survivors pass away is to collect the important things, the evidence, the documents of the Holocaust, and bring it here to the archives of Yad Vashem, so that everybody will be able to see the things that they managed to bring with themselves when they came to Israel. One of the things that we have here is actually a soup bowl from the Dachau concentration camp. That is a very important piece of information, because if you look at Holocaust survivor testimonies, they often actually mention these soup bowls. So here we have one. We have clothing, clothes that children used. We have a teddy bear, things that people had managed to bring with them to when they came to Israel. Here we have actually a photo album, and that is very rare. There aren't that many albums that actually survived. And this family, they actually managed to take it with them when they sailed to Israel. And then, of course, we have people who were fighting in the Soviet army. There are many such veterans who came to Israel, to Eretz Israel, after the war, so they always have these medallions. And actually, in the Holocaust Memorial, you would see many such veterans wearing their medallions. And here we have a prayer book. Prayer books were very rare, and people, if they could manage to get one, we know stories where the survivors, they were in a camp, and they would even sell their last piece of bread to be able to get a prayer book. So that was something very, very special. And there's actually a handwritten prayer book there, so that's even more unique. We have some works of art that we have been given, and then somebody had managed to take apart. You see the number from the concentration camp. They had managed to take that from the shirt and that's here. And the numbers, of course, are very important, because based on the number, you could know when the person had come into the camp. Just lots of dolls. Dolls are actually a very interesting part, because the dolls at that time, they were very different from what we have today. And most of the people, the little girls who had a doll, they had it with them when they were in hiding in a convent or with a Christian family somewhere. And we know that it was very hard for them to give up those dolls. And why is that? You know, that doll is more than a doll. That's the only thing that the person has from their family. So that doll, when you give up the doll, it's like you are losing the last person, the last contact with your family. But we have some of them here at Yad Vashem. Some of the people who donated them, they wrote letters to the dolls before they gave them over.
We conclude our program today with some sights and sounds within Israel. Thank you for joining us today, and be sure to visit our website at www.icejcanada.tv or call us at 1-866-324-9133. And for our Canadian residents, you can ask for your free Canada Israel pin. Through your contribution, you can participate by giving to ICEJ Canada, to the Haifa Home for Holocaust Survivors, Women at Risk Red Carpet Project, Operation Life Shield Bomb-Proof Shelters, Shoulder to Shoulder Alias Support, School for the Deaf, Beit Singer Children's Home, Israel in Crisis, Beit Rachel Strauss Inclusive Community, Magan David Adam Emergency Services, Christian Friends of Yad Vashem, Scholarships for Canadian Young Adults to Experience Israel, Educational Fund, ICEJ Communication Media Fund, Gift, Estate, Securities Funds.